Hello, I'm going to be using Copic markers to draw Brian's box. Bridgens of Instagram has been sharing photos and inviting artists to draw them in their own style. I'm going to be using marker boards by Crescent. They are 5 by 7 inches and have a nice smooth surface. They come in a set of 3 as a test pack from Jerry's Artorama. This digger was the first challenge I did using the marker board and Copics. I really liked the way the markers behaved on the board. If you want to draw this particular photo, you can find it with hashtag #DrawBriansDigger. I like to sketch in my idea using a 2B.5 mechanical pencil. This gives me plenty of opportunity to make corrections and be sure the drawing is going in the right direction. Next, I used a Castell Ecco fine liner. These are pigment pens and are waterproof and claim to have high light fast rating. I used this pen for the final outlines and some of the darker shading. It is a nice rich dark black that works well for this cartoon style. The nib is a 0.7, which I find to be quite chunky, so switched to a 0.5 Jerry's own brand technical pen for more of the interior lines. I always like to pick up a couple of those pens when I'm in Jerry's because they're well made. They last quite a long time and more importantly they're waterproof, so make an ideal companion to wet or dry mixed media pieces. Once I've finished inking, I erase the graphite under the drawing. I make sure I don't miss any areas with the black ink and then move on to picking out my Copics. For this project I settled on 3 shades of blue, a light, a mid-tone and a dark. This makes blending much easier. When I'm picking out my marker colours, I like to use Strathmore marker paper. It's quite good. It's fairly standard marker paper. It's nice and smooth and it doesn't bleed through too badly onto the other side. I like to make sure the tones of blues, in this case, that I'm using are going to play well together. I work light to dark and used the lightest blue to cover the entire drawing. I'm trying to avoid creating streaks, so I make sure to keep the pen strokes going in one direction. Going over the same area more than once will result in a darker shade of blue, since these markers work extremely well for layering. My second layer of ink is the mid-toned blue. I'm working from the edges, flicking my pen towards the middle of the drawing. I want it to blend into that lighter layer, so that the end result will be a highlight running through the middle of the drawing. I then take my darkest blue and keep it close to the edges. I don't go all the way around on this layer because I want the inks to remain wet so I can blend. I do that by taking my lightest blue and working in that upward stroke so I can create the gradation I want. The blend wasn't as smooth as I'd hoped, so I tried something different. So I used the darker tone at the very edge, the mid-tone to take that darker blue a little further up the page, and then the lightest blue to smooth out the gradual change in shade towards the middle. This is the bit I like doing the best. I use a warm black colour to add the undercarriage elements and the wheels. I was a little clumsy with the wheel shapes and the centres, so I used a blender to smooth out that middle area and pull some of that black ink into the middle. Blenders are somewhat mislabelled since blending is not their strong point. They can also be used for removing ink that has strayed into the wrong area, since they work by soaking up the colour. If you're quick and it's a light colour, you can sometimes erase it completely. However, you're more likely to end up with a slight stain, particularly with the reds and oranges. It's important once you've finished using your blender pen that you clean the nib on a separate piece of paper. The ink will stay there and can be deposited on a new drawing if you're not careful. I decided to use various warm greys to finish the roof and the steps. The contrast between the two was just enough to suggest a little light reflection of both those elements. Next, I use a Uniball Signo Broad white jelly pen to add some highlights and brighten the white areas, since the jelly ink is brighter white than the illustration board. These can also be used for minor corrections for messy artists like me. The original reference has Admiralty Constabulary written on the side, but because I messed with the proportions of the box and the fact that my handwriting leaves something to be desired, I settled on Admiralty Popo. I'm using a darker grey here to add in shadow, since light and shadow is really what brings things to life. One of the best bits of advice I was given was let your darks be really dark and the rest will fall into place. I found that to work well for me across all media. Decided to use a red Posca pen to add some detail to the wheels. Since the ink is already dark, my Copic markers would not really show, so I felt this was a good solution since it is actually acrylic paint. All that's left to do now is add the shadow underneath the trailer. I do that using 2 shades of grey, a lighter one for the larger area and the darker one for the cast shadow directly underneath. If you've made it this far, thank you for sticking with me. Please consider a thumbs up, subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that you'll see other videos as I upload them.